Hi, have you ever had the feeling there was a mystery to life, that there was something unseen that was behind the scene? Something you couldn't fully understand with your mind or completely discern with your heart, that was invisible but was active and reaching out to hug you, to hold you, to open your eyes, to open your ears, and open your senses. Hi, I'm Michael Shevack, and welcome to GODSEARCH. This is podcast 29, and we're going to continue the discussion about covenant. Actually, we're going to continue the discussion of covenant through the entire podcast series because that is the exciting vehicle by which one can begin to have the experience called God. The experience called God, an experience of good that includes truth, unity, and the correct use of your creativity as a supernatural creature. Not just a natural creature like birds, bees, and trees, but a supernatural creature. So I thought that I would take a little deviation from the teachy preachy stuff that I've been doing to lay down a foundation of understanding, which is really what I have been doing up till now. Podcasting is a totally new experience for me, and I thank you very much for being part of my education. A lot of my students wanted me to get out and do this, and I really resisted it, and I said to the one, the universe, the force, the source. I like the word God personally, but I'm not pushing it on you. I said, look, if you want me to teach and you want me to podcast, you got to show me an open door. And a very mysterious thing took place. And someone I hadn't seen in, 15, 20 years just took me out to breakfast and said, you're podcasting. And that was even before saying, hi, how are you? It was very, very strange. Anyway, so I am here. So I thought I'd take a different approach today because rather than doing teachy preachy kind of stuff to give you the intellectual understanding that has been interfering with your discovering and uncovering, and we all know the recovering from bad religion, I thought I would kind of condense some of this into a personal story, if you don't mind. It's one of the most transformative things that ever happened to me. In fact, I wrote an article for it for a local newspaper, and it was really received. I got more mail than I had ever gotten from anything because it was a totally nonsensical experience. If the world is simply the price of beans, if the world is simply do this, do this, do this, do this. If it fits the box that we're all placed in from the moment we're born, thank God it's there. We need that box. But when we only know that box, it's a prison, kind of like a crib, that where they place all of reality over you in mobiles, and you have to learn how reality works by playing with one little thing, and that's how you think it actually works. But there's more to life and more to the box than the mobile that's circulating over your crib. So let me tell you a story. We talked about covenant. Let me frame it. We talked about covenant being spiritual, where you have to grow, you got to go, and you got to learn and know. All right. We talked about learning moral lessons along the way that are very important. We talked about legal issues. And we talked about some ethical issues, and we talked about cosmic issues. I'm telling you is an experience that has all of these intermingled in some fashion, okay? Different percentages. But all of these things condense in this life teaching experience, which is a complete opening of a mystery that if you don't believe in God, you'd better have a dumber idea, okay? Or an equivalent idea, or if you don't believe in it, you'd better give me a different explanation. One of the most difficult things in my spiritual path has been integrating, as a husband and a father, money. And how do I earn money? And I've floundered through many, many different careers. I started with medicine. It was a bad Jewish dream. And then I wound up in advertising. I was an advertising creative director. You may know the campaign, Gillette, the best a man can get. I did that campaign. It's still running, which is pretty amazing. And I got Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young for Apple computers. That was fun. That was really, really a fun experience. And, and these were jobs that produced funds to take care of all of the nice, upper middle class things that I was raised to have. But at a certain point in my spiritual growth, I was divided into two different legs. I was moving in one direction spiritually, as I had been working on since I was 16, and I had actually been ordained a rabbi. And the other side of me was Madison Avenue, and I did not know how to reconcile these things. And I went on a very difficult path of daring to believe that one can have unity in one's life, that one can have the spiritual integration that is promised by the word God, and that it can include the basic stuff that gives us trouble every day in everyday life and makes things very hard, especially for men who are oftentimes bashed these days, and it's not fair. It's very hard and it is a burden to support a family. And I do not believe we men are honored enough for what we do and what we do right and what we do, virtuously, from the Latin vir for masculine. Just want to say that as a footnote to what I think is needed, which is a kind of masculinist revolution. But we'll leave that aside for the future. I reached a point, as oftentimes happens on a spiritual path. If you're working through something, you can wind up unwittingly making the situation worse, because what happens is you're concentrating on achieving it and you are forced to face your deepest, darkest fears. For me, especially so, since I had signed on to be a teacher and I had to know what I was talking about. And I would not even go into the world to teach unless I had some kind of idea that what I was teaching was not the same party line, BS that I was taught as a child. So anyway, my financial situation at a point in my life got extremely, extremely difficult and painful. If I'm telling you, so difficult that there was a month. I remember the first month I did not have money for my mortgage. And that's a frightening thing. Okay. And I was terrified. Now I want to tell you the mystery, because this mystery reveals covenant. I didn't have the money for a mortgage. I was at that time freelancing because I wanted to integrate earning money with my everyday spirituality in covenant, which is everyday, growing and being and trusting the flow of life. And so I had switched to a more easygoing freelancing to transition. I was not interested in synagogue life or formal religion because I would have taught the same stuff that I was taught, and I didn't want to do that. Okay. Even though I was educated in it, I didn't want to do that. But anyway, 1 month happened where I could not pay the mortgage and I got scared. There was no one I could borrow money from. There were no credit cards. There was nothing at all to rely on. And there was just me. Just me. And I got so frightened, I tore out of my house. Tore out of my house. And I go onto the road that passes my house, and I looked up in the sky and made a fist. I said, damn it. If you're there, help me. If you're not going to help me, what the hell do I need to believe some kind of fictional idea that you even exist? Now, I'm not telling you it was God. I'm not telling you it was the universe. I'm not telling you it was spirit. I'm not telling you how to interpret this. I am not creating a religious cult here. Okay? You interpret it your ways. But I did that and said, either you do something and demonstrate that you're here, or I have had it. All right. And I was serious because that's how scared I was, terrified. I had a wife and 3 children laying on my legs. As my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, she was from New Orleans, always used to say, well, darling, you're laying on his leg, you know. It's a burden. So anyway, I did that. And very shortly after that, I heard in the book of Exodus, the still small voice. The still small voice of God. Some Christians call that spirit. Other people call it other things. But I heard a voice, and the voice said to me, your house is made of wood. Your house is made of wood. Well, I got furious. I said, what is that? What kind of advice is that? I don't have money for the mortgage, and you're telling me my house is made of wood. And I yelled to the sky. No one was around, so I didn't have to worry about them, putting me in a straitjacket and giving me medicine. And I heard the voice again, this time palpably louder. That always happens when you're supposed to pay more attention to it. So I paid more attention to it. And I switched brains. I said, a house is made of wood. What kind of advice is that? And then I switched brains to use my rational mind. And I said, okay, if my house is made of wood, it's made of a tree. If it's made of a tree, then it's connected to the earth. If it's connected to the earth, it's connected to the planet, which is connected to the sun, which is connected to the solar system, which is connected to the, oh my God, Eureka. I got so excited. I'm standing in the middle of a street with my fist clenched in defiance to God. And I get so excited. If my house is made of wood, then the laws of economics and the laws of money have to be related to the laws of the universe. They have to be. You can't have that. My house is made of wood. The mortgage that pays for the house is part of the substance of creation. Okay? It has to be. The laws of economics don't materialize out of the laws of creation or existence or God to begin with. This is all an issue of scale. We'll talk about this another time. So I got so excited because I knew there had to be an answer. I felt there had to be an answer, and I barreled into my house and made a right into my study, which had 2 walls filled with books. And I'm telling you the truth, all right? I'm not taking medication. You want to speak to a psychiatrist, they'll tell you I'm fine. But this is the God's honest truth. There was a halo, a little white light around one book on my shelf. And I'll tell you what that book was later. And I said, oh my God, I must be losing my mind. So, I had enough medical background. I checked myself. I knew my birthday. I knew the day. I knew the day of the week. I knew where I was. I knew I was not clinically mad. And I said, okay, let's go with it. The spiritual aspect of covenant. Let's go with it. Okay. I pulled the book out that had a halo around it. You're talking 2 walls of books, and one book had light around it. And I opened it up, and inside was a coffee-stained Xerox, filthy, shredded Xerox filled with coffee. And I'm going to change the names to protect the innocent. It said Robertson Communications, Los Angeles, California. Go. What is this? Once again, I go, Are you out of your mind? What the hell is this? This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Why the hell are you sending me to this? And again, I had to switch brains because I wasn't fully accepting what had happened. I wasn't now going or having faith and proceeding. So I said, Robertson Communications, LA, I don't know who they are. But what I did was I called the information. Back then there was information, and I could not get the operator to tell me Robertson Communication. I searched everywhere in LA and I couldn't find it. And so I started to scream again, what are you doing? Switched brains again. You know, I don't know Robertson Communications, but I do know a John Robertson who lived in Danbury, Connecticut. And I used to work with him 20 years ago. So I go on information and I find he's still in Danbury, and I give him a call and he picks up the phone, and I go, blast from the past, Michael Shevack here. He goes, I don't believe it. I have been trying to reach you for 2 weeks and I've not been able to reach you at all. I need you this weekend. I have an assignment. It was a CVS campaign for the drug thing. It was a pitch for a big advertising agency. He was the head of new business. He said, I need you to immediately come up with a campaign. And I am low in money. I have very little funds to share with you, unfortunately. Okay. But if you come in, I promise you, I can write you immediately in advance a check for $30,000. God's honest truth. Okay. So, business being what it is, you play a little cagey game and go, well, John, it's not exactly my fee, it's not. But you're a friend of mine, and I didn't tell him that I was like out on the street and didn't even have money for a mortgage. So I just said, thank you very much for thinking of me. That's so kind. It's very funny. You want to be spiritual and grow, but the world doesn't fully let you. So a moral issue surfaces here. I basically lied. I basically lied because in this kind of situation, the ethics of correct business posturing to work within the system required me to represent myself, even though morally it was a lie. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. So I showed up. Okay. And I showed up on a Saturday. So, I come from a Jewish background and I'm a rabbi, and that's usually a day that I don't earn any money on. But it was an astonishing lesson of taking care of my wife and my kids. And it really was putting our home first. And I had to rethink, why is this happening? I broke a law. Okay. Now, here I start with this cosmic vision of my house is made of wood. I have to spiritually face it. I have to morally face what's happening. I have to face the ethical issues involved with lying out of a necessity, which are morally defective, and I broke a religious law, which we'll get back to. Anyway, I went in, I sized up the campaign, I instantly knew what to do, created the campaign. You may have seen it. It ran a few years ago, many years ago. It was Care That Touches Everyone One at a Time for CBS. And we won the business. Okay, it was very successful. So win, 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 win. It was providential. It was from the cosmos down, right down to the nitty-gritty and money and business. That told me what I'm telling you. Covenant is an experience where all of these different layers, all of these different things, the spiritual, the moral, the legal, the ethical, and the historical, which I left out because we're participating in an evolving economy and world economy. So there was this historical component plus the um, if I didn't mention it before, the legal issue of breaking a religious law, which is the same thing as breaking any law in order to survive. So that told me that experience was a condensation of all of the lessons that I had learned, but you couldn't learn it from a book. Only in life, life on God search is our authority. If you go back to podcast number 1 and number 2, life condensed all of the theory from the books and all of the thinking and philosophizing and all of the religious literature that I had been pummeled with so they could give me a title. But it wasn't whole. And I didn't fully understand it until it condensed. Until it condensed. Okay. Anyway, that day, I came back to my home with a $30,000 check in my hand. And as I entered the door of my house, my eye glanced at the mezuzah on my right door frame. That's an amulet for those who don't know. It's an amulet that's in the house of Jews, and it harkens to, blood on the lintels in the Passover story that protected the Hebrew people during the plague. But it's an amulet. And it was at that moment that I really understood that custom. I'd done it because it was pretty. I did it because my parents did it. I did it because, it was what we did. But I never fully owned its meaning. My meaning was my house is made of wood. The entire cosmos acts through me as an individual spiritually to discern the correct moral and ethical nuances in order to advance the history of human beings and our economy and our sciences. And sometimes what's considered die-hard laws have to be bent to accommodate survival because life gets priority over governments, whether they are secular governments or whether they are religious governments. The preservation of life is prior and more important than anything. Well, I looked up at that mezuzah, that amulet, and I understood that God gave me that house. All right, you don't like that phrase? My combination of my consciousness with the order of the universe produced it so that it was given to me as if it would have been given to a bunny rabbit or a wolf or a bear hibernating. I had my home by virtue of a mystery beyond myself. It wasn't my materialist advertising kind of rational business mind that saved my butt. It was a mystery that was unseen, that was behind that scene. That's what saved me. And it pried me open. It forced my eyes open. It forced my ears open. It forced me to recircuit my brain so I wasn't so obstinate and unable to take in something invisible and unseen, or an inner voice without questioning whether it was some form of psychosis, which, by the way, comes from the Greek, meaning a movement of spirit. You know, got all messed up in the translation from Freud to English. We'll talk about that another time. It was an amazing experience that is the rudimentary, personal, spiritual experience behind covenant. Now, if you take this kind of insight and spiritual awakening and you have that God search for just one humble guy trying to take care of his family, and you combine that with other guys of all different kinds of guys, women guys, guys, I'm being politically correct here, all kinds of guys. And we truly engage in a covenant where we are conjoined together as a family, as a household, which is the Greek root word of economy. There is no stopping us because the miracles will enter into our lives, we will share them, and we will transform our nation. And it will be a light unto the nations, if you don't mind me quoting the book of Isaiah. And America will have its light back. It's not going to be the blue and the red war. It's going to have a light, a light, you know? It will have its light back. And that requires a spiritual renovation. So, on this day, when I'm telling you a very personal story to kind of coalesce everything that I've taught about covenant, I just want you to realize that there is hope. There is hope. Every individual that goes on a God search opens up the door for every other individual, and we all resonate off of each other. And if we do it, we will spread from ourselves to our relations, to our friendships, to our communities, to our nations, and the entire world, if not the entire galaxy upon galaxy. God only knows how many intelligent people out there who would like to benefit from us. This is Michael Shevack for God Search. Please go to yourgodsearch.com. Let me hear from you and continue your God search. Trust life and open to the mystery. Uncover God, discover God, and recover from the blindfolds that prevented you from seeing that this was an incredibly amazing, spiritually vibrant and vigorous reality that is right in front of you. But we have to look. We have to see it. We have to know it for ourselves. Thanks. See you next time, next Wednesday. It's about 5:45 a.m. Eastern Daytime. As always, God bless. And we're going to go into more detail, even more, next time. Bye-bye.